south, 9 or 10 for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. And we start the day on Wednesday with rain or showers across parts of the Midlands into southern England. But then by the afternoon, the focus for some really lively and torrential downpours likely across parts of London, Kent, East Sussex, for example. And here there is the risk of flash flooding. Some serious thunderstorms perhaps for some, but again, they'll be hit and miss. Elsewhere, a quieter day. Plenty of sunshine actually through the day for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, and then those cloud breaks drift south. Eventually the showers in the south ease away. Thursday brings some outbreaks of rain into the northwest, whilst Friday sees further showers for many, but not quite as lively.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the briefing this afternoon. I'm Tom Harwood and here is what's coming up over the next hour. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are in Scotland today to try and win the support of Tory members in that part of the country. We'll be getting reaction from Glasgow to see if any of them are more popular than Boris Johnson, who still remains extremely divisive in Scotland. Inflation has driven the fastest fall in real pay on the record, falling further behind the rising cost of living, according to the latest official data, with those soaring energy bills, higher food and fuel prices hitting household budgets hard. Liam Halligan will be here to explain more. And the Ministry of Defence has said that it will end its control of the Channel migrant operations early next year and will pass responsibility back to the Border Force. We'll get the latest on the ever-growing crisis in the Channel. And through it all, give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me @gbnews.
It is 2 minutes past 3. Good afternoon. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. New figures have shown wages are falling at their fastest rate since records began more than 2 decades ago. The ONS say growth in regular pay, excluding bonuses, was 4.7% up between April and June. But when we then take into account rising prices, the real value of wages actually fell by 3%. Household budgets are being stretched by increasing prices of food, energy and fuel. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has defended her party's plans to help the economy.
We're still in the leadership contest at the moment. Now, my priority is reducing taxes so people can keep more of their own money. at the same time as making sure we boost energy supply. It's wrong to just keep sticking plasters on this problem. What we actually need to do is make sure we are unleashing more energy, for example, from the North Sea. We're investing in technologies like nuclear, and we're finding more renewable energy as well. We need to solve this problem for the long term.
The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says what's happening to wages is further evidence of the mounting pressure on millions of people.
Look, this is further pressure on so many families, so many working people. And this wage stagnation has been going on for 10 years. So I really understand just how people are struggling. It's one of the reasons that we announced our energy price freeze yesterday, to keep those bills down and to make the choice that the oil and gas companies in the North Sea should pay a windfall tax to help people who are struggling through this winter period. So it's further evidence, I think, of the pressure that so many millions of people are under.
The US First Lady Jill Biden has tested positive for COVID-19. She began experiencing symptoms late last night. Officials have described them, though, as mild. Well, that happened just a few weeks after President Biden tested positive last month. The White House has confirmed that the president today is negative. A man's in a serious condition in hospital and 2 other people are injured after a shooting last night in northwest London. Armed police were called to a residential street in Brent just after 7 p.m. All 3 men were shot, but are in a stable condition today. The Metropolitan Police say the suspects fled before officers arrived at the scene. Former Manchester United player Ryan Giggs told police his head clashed with his ex-girlfriend during a tussle over a mobile phone in 2020, but that it wasn't deliberate. The 48-year-old is on trial for alleged controlling and coercive behaviour against his former partner, Kate Greville, and the alleged common assault of her younger sister. He denies all charges. We'll bring you up to date with the latest on the trial as we get it. A military base in Russian-occupied Crimea has been hit by a series of explosions. Moscow claimed the blasts were caused by sabotage following a series of attacks last week on Russian warplanes along the Crimean coast. Ukraine hasn't publicly admitted to the attack. Well, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling on world leaders to help force Russian troops to withdraw from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station in southeastern Ukraine. The Conservative leadership candidates have vowed to better scrutinise the Scottish government if they become the next Prime Minister. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will face off at another at Hustings in Perth this evening. Both have stated their opposition to a referendum on Scottish independence. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has committed to get Scotland's economy moving. The former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, wants there to be greater scrutiny of Scottish civil servants in the country for it to be more accountable, whilst calling for the unions to work together. Well, Conservative MP Andrew Bowie believes Sunak is the ideal candidate for Scotland to remain in the UK.
And it's my view that Rishi Sunak is best placed to ensure Scotland's place at the heart of our United Kingdom for years to come. That's why I'm backing him. We need to ensure that the UK government is as representative and as, stands up for Scottish people as it does for people across the rest of the United Kingdom. That's one way that we're going to ensure Scotland remains at the heart of the UK. But the other is by taking the SNP on at the ballot box and beating them.
The body of a teenage girl's been found after she got into difficulty in water yesterday near Manchester. Police say they're confident her death isn't suspicious. A yellow thunderstorm warning is in place for most of the UK. The alert will stay there for southern England until tomorrow. The forecast rain, though, isn't enough to remedy dry weeks of dry weather. A drought's been declared in Yorkshire today, and that region now joins 8 areas of England which were moved into drought status last week. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Tom for this afternoon's briefing.
Good afternoon. Now, the 2 Tory leadership candidates, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, are due to attend a hustings tonight in Perth as they battle it out for number 10. Both Truss and Sunak have pledged to tackle the issue of Scottish independence by taking a harder line against First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. Liz Truss has been visiting a whisky distillery in Elgin, and she was asked if her comments about Nicola Sturgeon being an attention seeker may have alienated voters in Scotland.
Well, I'm absolutely passionate about Scotland and the United Kingdom. I grew up in Paisley, I've spent my primary school years there, and what I want is to deliver for the people of Scotland, and that's what I'm focused on.
What can you do to help the people of Scotland in terms of the cost of living crisis and the high price of energy at the moment?
Well, the first thing I will do is reduce people's taxes. We shouldn't have raised national insurance. It's cost ordinary families money. I'd also have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to save people money on their fuel bills, and also boost energy supply to bring prices down.
How can you shore up support for the union? There's one poll saying today that whether yourself or Rishi Sunak win, that there will be a boost for independence. How can you shore up support for the union here?
Well, first of all, we had a referendum in 2014. It was clear it was a one-in-a-generation referendum, and the Scottish people voted for the Union, for the United Kingdom. And I'm absolutely committed to delivering for Scotland, delivering jobs and growth and opportunity, working closely with Douglas Ross to take on the SNP who've been failing Scottish people, whether that's on education, whether that's on health, or whether it's on the transport system.
Liz Truss there speaking a little earlier today. Well, let's cross over now to Davy Donaldson, the GBNews Scotland reporter who's in Stirling for us. And Davy, what's the mood on the ground, I suppose, right across Scotland as the whole Tory circus makes its way to Perth tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people do see it as just that, a circus. Exactly. God knows what Rob Roy over my shoulder, the statue here, Rob Roy McGregor, what he would have made of it, but not a lot, I'm sure, as do really a lot of the rest of people in Scotland, because nobody seems that bothered. Certainly when I was in Glasgow earlier on today, a lot of people really not that interested in Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss, and you can't really blame them. This is a country, of course, that's dominated by an SNP vote, so it was probably always going to be that way. And as I said before in previous lives, it's very much a box-ticking exercise, you feel, by the two parties, because there isn't a great deal of support. There's only 6 Conservative MPs in Scotland, so that really shows you the level of support. And as for Liz Truss saying about Douglas Ross trying to shake things up and get the SNP out of power, I think there's a long, long way to go as far as that's concerned. That's very much poor talk from her, you would have to say, because that really is something that is pipe dream stuff at the moment. Earlier on today, though, I spoke to people here in Stirling to get their thoughts on both parties coming up here. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss both in Scotland today. What do you make of that, and do you think it'll make any difference?
I don't think it'll make a blind bit of difference at all. I think they should get on and decide who's going to run the Conservative Party and who's going to lead the country, and stop wasting time.
I mean, Liz Truss has come out and said that Nicola Sturgeon is an attention seeker. Is that something you think she is, or?
Absolutely. She needs to shut up and get on with her job and stop pushing for unwanted referendums.
Might tighten the case for independence. It might make people a bit keener to be independent once they hear what they really think when they're talking to their own.
Yeah, that's the real key issue here, isn't it? The fact that neither Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak willing to speak to Scotland regarding IndyRef 2, and that's going to have a huge bearing on people's decision and thought process here. The other thing as well, Rishi Sunak even going even further and saying that he wants to centralise the UK government and wants to make sure that things like education, which was previously under the devolved Scotland devolution Parliament, that that's now going to be looked at more deeply at Westminster, and also saying that the other people should come in front of him. The Chief Civil Servant of Scotland should come in front of him every year for an update. Again, that's not going to go down well in Scotland either. So it remains to be seen what's going to happen tonight. But I think either way, very much, this is really something that Scottish people didn't want to happen. They didn't want them both to come here, and I'm sure they'll be pretty delighted when they pair them and move on to Belfast tomorrow.
Yes, I suppose it does seem like this leadership race has been going on for quite a long time. This is only around halfway through all of those different hustings that are going around the country. But Davy Donaldson, thank you for bringing us the view there from Scotland. Interesting stuff. Well, let's discuss this a little bit further now with the Scottish Conservative advisor, Kyle Thornton. Kyle, I suppose the first question is, off the back of that public reaction we've just been hearing about, is there a distinction between the way that Conservative members, Conservative voters even, in Scotland are paying attention to this race compared to the wider country? Or is it all seeming a bit like this thing has already been sewn up?
Well, I think I'd love to say it was absolutely sewn up. for Liz Truss. I'm certainly backing her. But I think people are genuinely interested about what both candidates are saying. I think it's good for members in Scotland to get the chance to put forward their questions to them and to make sure, because, one of these two people are going to be our Prime Minister. And I think it's really important that, Scottish members get the chance to engage and that people across Scotland, are able to hear what both candidates are saying, their plans, their policies. Scotland is a country that not very long ago voted to stay a part of the United Kingdom. So it's really key that the Conservative and Unionist Party is paying attention to all parts of the country. And one of the things, certainly I'm really heartened by, is both candidates seem to be taking the concerns of people in Scotland really seriously, which is good, and I think bodes well for the Union going forward, whether it's Liz or Rishi.
I suppose one of the big questions is there that much of a difference between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak when it comes to union policy? We're hearing that both of them wouldn't want to accept another partition referendum within this parliament, both of them saying that the 2014 vote should last, as it said, for a generation. Where's the difference between these candidates?
I mean, I don't think anyone will be surprised that, the Conservative Party leadership candidates are both pro-UK, they're in favour of the Union. They want to respect that once-in-a-generation vote. People in Scotland don't want a second referendum. So it's good that both candidates are backing. But, being no doubt, what is being discussed across the country in terms of the economy, defence, lots of different issues are just as relevant in Scotland. I suspect in Perth tonight, what members will be asking, yes, we'll be talking about the Union and how we can beat the SNP, but also things about our taxes, about how we address the cost of living crisis, about how we make sure we improve the economy, improve people's lives. Scotland isn't a one-issue country, no matter how much Nicola Sturgeon might like it to be. There's a range of things we want to talk about. And, I'm really, glad that both candidates are up and engaging seriously. We've got people from across the party backing both, getting really active in the campaign, and that can only be good. And, hopefully we'll have a good hustings tonight. We'll get a good range of questions fielded by both candidates.
It's interesting to see just how many Conservative MPs in Scotland have not declared for either candidate. 2 have declared for Rishi Sunak. The remaining 4 have been undecided. Yes, a group of members of the Scottish Parliament declared for Liz Truss fairly early in this campaign, but a lot of elected representatives in Scotland are sitting on their hands. Why do you think that might be?
Well, I mean, Douglas Ross, as leader of the party in Scotland, has said he's going to work with either of them, so he's not going to back one or the other. I think that's quite a fair position to take. He has to work with them regardless of win or lose for either candidate. We've also seen, I certainly know David Windell has come out and backed Liz Truss as well here in Scotland. So that's, our longest serving MP is backing Liz Truss here. And actually, our elected representatives, particularly our councillors and our MSPs, have been very active on both sides, both for Rishi and for Liz, and have been, really active. And I'm sure we'll see quite a few of them, at the hustings tonight, supporting whichever candidate they're backing. And for some, some are, I think fairly deciding, do you know what, actually, I like both candidates, both of them, are one way or the other. They're members too, they get to vote. But I suppose at this stage in the campaign, it's the members that are voting. MPs get one vote of 150,000 people, whereas the members actually will decide this. MPs can help narrow that contest down. It's really up to the members at this point to pick who they want to win. And, certainly I think Liz Truss is edging it at the moment in terms of being a favourable winner, but it's all to play for. And, it's good to see both camps aren't resting on their laurels. They're, battling for votes. And, like I said, I hope it'll be Liz. I'm sure it will be, but she's out fighting for votes. And as a Paisley girl at heart, I'm sure she'll enjoy being here in Scotland today.
I wonder to what extent will this hustings feel a bit different from the other hustings that we've seen so far. Clearly, today is a day where we've learnt a bit more about the scale of the cost of living crisis, but clearly the Constitution weighs heavy in all of the debates that we're seeing in Holyrood and in Scottish elections since 2014, really. Which do you think will weigh more heavily upon the minds of Scottish Conservative members this evening, the economy or the Constitution?
I mean, I think the economy, genuinely will be the top issue. But I suppose here in Scotland, the challenge is we have a First Minister who is attempting to use independence to deflect from everything else. And rather than, sitting down, getting on with the day job, focusing on cost of living, on the steps the Scottish Government can take, actually what we're seeing is a continued push for a second referendum that very few people in Scotland actually want. So the matters are linked. I think what members in Scotland will be keen to ask is, how can we park this constitutional division that the SNP and Nicola Sturgeon keep wanting to push, so that all of Scotland's governments at UK, Scottish level can work together to help people on the ground, because that's the most important thing. And I think for people, across Scotland, if they're yes or no, if they've changed their minds, what most actually want to see is, let's get on with the immediate problems facing the country, rather than dragging ourselves back into, independence or not, because we decided it not very long ago. We need to help people now. And I think, people worrying about their bills, trying to plan for the future, actually would far rather politicians spent their time talking about, how they can help and grow the economy, rather than, having to deal with Nicola Sturgeon's continued push for independence, which, simply is draining Scotland's politics of the time to talk about anything else, as much as the Scottish Conservatives are pushing, every day in Parliament as much as they can to focus on things like, ferries that never seem to be finished, around, spending that seems to be going missing. The Scottish Parliament, really does, need to have a push for accountability. And it's really good, actually, to see Liz Truss, for example, talking about giving parliamentary privilege to MSPs so they can challenge the Scottish Government without fear of being sued, in the same way that MPs at Westminster can. And it's good to see Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss both talking about making sure we know where the money's going. We've seen some, quite honestly, questionable things happening in Holyrood, COVID cash being spent on ferries, for example. So it's really good to see that attention being brought here. And hopefully, actually, that's better. And I'm sure the SNP will kick and scream about all of this. But the question has to be, why don't you want more scrutiny? If there's nothing to hide, why be afraid of having some more scrutiny at Holyrood?
Really interesting point there. Well, Kyle Thornton, Conservative advisor, and indeed Liz Truss backer, thank you very much for joining us here on the briefing this afternoon. I appreciate your time. Now, coming up, wages rise, but not enough to outstrip inflation. In fact, it's the fastest real terms pay drop on record. Well, GB News economics maestro Liam Halligan will be here. Before then, let's look at the weather.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here with the latest weather update from the Met Office. Certainly some lively weather out there this afternoon, and there will be further showers and hit and miss thunderstorms during the rest of the day. Not everyone will be affected, though. It is turning drier towards the northwest. This area of high pressure is building in from the northwest, and that's settling things down across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. But these fronts and an area of low pressure to the south is maintaining some very intense downpours, some thunderstorms, and that will continue to be the case across southern and central England, parts of Wales overnight. The speckled nature of the showers indicates that not everyone will catch one, but if you do, well, prepare for some surface water issues, some tricky travelling conditions. For example, a warm night in the south, 15 to 16 Celsius. Much fresher for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 8 to 10 Celsius here. But actually, skies clearing overnight and a beautiful start to the day. Plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Increasingly North Wales, parts of the North Midlands as well. But the action is focused towards the south on Wednesday as far as showers and thunderstorms are concerned. And there could be some very lively downpours there towards the southeast, in particular, some slow-moving thunderstorms. All the while, it's turning cooler. Temperatures at around 24, 25 Celsius in the southeast, high teens, low 20s elsewhere. And further showers will continue across central and southern parts of England through the evening and overnight. Eventually, many of these will fade away. A gap then, clear spells for many, but further cloud and rain pushes into western Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. 12 or 13 Celsius in the north, 16, 17 further south, so still a relatively warm night to come. But actually for many it's a bright start to the day. Certainly some sunshine to be had across Northern England, the Midlands, Wales, southwest first thing. The cloud and rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland pushes south. And it turns more showery so that it's sunshine and showers for many on Friday, drier again on Saturday.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable, and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Welcome back. Now, inflation has driven the fastest fall in real pay on record, falling further behind the rising cost of living according to the latest official data. Average wages rose by 4.7% between April and June, but this was quickly outpaced by the price rises, with soaring energy bills, higher food and fuel prices hitting household budgets hard. However, there was some positive data, with the number of UK workers on payrolls rising by 73,000 between June and July to 29.7 million people. Well, joining me now to digest this all in the studio is GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan. And I suppose the first question, Liam, is this what was expected? We know that inflation is high. We know that people are going to be struggling. Should we be surprised by these numbers?
No, we shouldn't, but they do take a little bit of explanation. And I thought you did well there, but just to reiterate, because our viewers and listeners are being told wages are going up and then they're going down as well. It's not really hard to get your head around. What's happening is that, pounds and pence wages are up strongly. They're up at the fastest rate in 15 years, up almost 5% during the 3 months from October to June compared to the same 3-month period in 2021. It's important to stress that. And wages in pounds and pence are up because there's lots of vacancies and workers have some power because the employers need the workers because there are labour shortages. We'll come on to that. But even those high increases in wages by historic standards are completely offset by the even higher increase in prices with inflation. Inflation in June was 9.4%. That's a 35-year high. We're going to get another inflation number tomorrow, which will be even higher. And when inflation is higher than the rate at which your wages are going up, you've lost out. What we call your real wages are down, and that's what almost everybody watching and listening to this show will be experiencing. Higher costs, food, fuel, all household energy bills and so on. Those necessities means not only are real wages falling, but because inflation imposes itself more on poorer households, they spend more on those necessities, the price of which is rising, their real wages are falling even more.
Is there a distinction between how wages are doing in the private sector versus the public sector? We've heard a lot about the need for pay restraint, about the need to avoid a price-wage spiral or indeed a wage-price spiral, but there might be less restraint in the private sector.
Yeah, I've read a lot of headlines online and in newspapers today that the public sector's getting left behind, right? Now, what is clear is that private sector wages over the last year have gone up faster than public sector wages. The numbers are in the fine print. Private sector wages went up 5.9% over the last year, and public sector wages went up 1.8%. So that's why a lot of people, particularly on other broadcasters, are complaining, the public sector is getting a hard time, those nasty private sector people. Well, let's just say this, only 22% of people work in the state sector, right? But even though their wages are going up less quickly than in the private sector, the average wage in the public sector is much higher than the average wage in the private sector. It's about 15% higher on a directly comparable basis. And then on top of that, people in the public sector overwhelmingly get much more holidays,
better pensions,
massive public sector pensions that are backed by taxpayers, better sick pay, better maternity leave and all the rest of it. Now, I don't begrudge those people in the public sector what they get. I want everybody to have a decent wage. But let's not think that the public sector is being bedraggled and that the private sector is streaking ahead. That 5.9% increase in private sector pay on average, that includes loads of high-rolling oligarchs that are getting massive pay rises, right? But a lot of people in the private sector, as you will know, Tom, they get much, much lower wages than in the public sector, less benefits, and they won't have any pay rise at all over the last year. So with 10% inflation, their real wages have been hammered.
Especially in the parts of the country that aren't in London and the South East, as was much litigated with a policy proposal by Liz Truss, pointing out how much less private sector people earn than public sector people in the parts of the country that aren't in the London and South East.
What often happens so for instance, on the Money Show today, I was talking to an extremely experienced HR professional, human resources professional. She's based in Darlington. She's called Nikki Jolly. She often comes on my show. She's superbly well-connected person, plugged into the Teesside labour market. She says the small and medium-sized firms that she works with often can't find people because there's so much public sector work in that part of the country.
There's the crowding out effect.
The public sector jobs mean that no one will take a private sector job because the public sector jobs are on such good deal, such high wages
so to some
compared
extent,
to local living standards.
This conversation around that policy that Liz Truss then subsequently
There's regional
dropped fairly
variations
quickly.
in public sector pay. That's what she was talking about.
The conversation that the media had about this was about, potentially scaling back the public sector in these areas might be anti-levelling up. But potentially, actually, scaling back the public sector in these areas might allow the private sector the room to grow, the room for growth in these areas that's so desperately needed.
Economics is hard, right? It's always a case of on the one hand, on the other. There is no science in economics. A lot of it is guesswork, and I do it for a living. So let me put that out there. But I must say the sort of media reaction to Liz Truss is completely respectable proposal. I know plenty of left-wing economists who have put out the notion that we need regional variations in public
living costs are different in different parts of the country.
All the rest of it. The media conversation, the response to Liz Truss there was completely one-sided, lopsided, I would say, almost to the point of being economically illiterate. And I was a bit disappointed that she didn't push back. If she should have told her advisory team, no, stop, I'm actually going to stick with this and I'm going to explain it because there's a lot of common sense here and there would be more private sector jobs in some parts of the country parts of the country that we focus on when we talk about levelling up, if public sector pay was a bit more in line with local living standards. That's not because you want to dumb down the public sector or give people a hard time. It's just basic arithmetic.
And it could indeed be interpreted in that sense as a levelling up policy, creating growth in those areas. Really interesting stuff there. Liam Halligan, thank you so much for talking through it all. Really appreciate that. Well, next on the briefing, the Ministry of Defence has said it will end control of Channel migrant operations early next year. We'll get the latest from our Home and Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White. But first, is your news update.
Good afternoon, it's 3:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. New figures, as you've been hearing, have shown that wages are falling at their fastest rate since records began more than 2 decades ago. The ONS say growth in regular pay, excluding bonuses, was 4.7% up between April and June. But when we take into account rising prices and inflation, the real value of wages fell by 3%. Household budgets are being stretched by increasing prices of food, energy and fuel. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has defended her party's plan to help the economy.
We're still in the leadership contest at the moment. Now, my priority is reducing taxes so people can keep more of their own money, at the same time as making sure we boost energy supply. It's wrong to just keep sticking plasters on this problem. What we actually need to do is make sure we are unleashing more energy, for example, from the North Sea. We're investing in technologies like nuclear, and we're finding more renewable energy as well. We need to solve this problem for the long term.
A military base in Russian-occupied Crimea has been hit by a series of explosions. Moscow claimed the blasts were caused by sabotage following a series of attacks last week on Russian warplanes along the Crimean coast. Ukraine hasn't publicly admitted to the attack. A man is in a serious condition in hospital and 2 other people are injured after a shooting last night in northwest London. Armed police were called to a residential street in Brent just after 7 o'clock last night. All 3 men were shot but are in a stable condition today. The Metropolitan Police say the suspects fled before officers arrived at the scene. The UK can expect days of thunder as heavy rain and flooding are set to continue. A yellow thunderstorm warning is in place for most of England and Wales. Flash flooding affected a number of areas in Scotland overnight. The alert will stay in place for southern England until Wednesday. Earlier today, the body of a teenage girl was found after she got into difficulty in water on Monday near Manchester. Police say they're confident her death isn't suspicious. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.209 and €1.189. The price of gold currently stands at £1,468.52 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, the Ministry of Defence has said that it will end its control of Channel migrant operations early next year, after recorded illegal crossings breached the level of 20,000 at the weekend. The Royal Navy took command and control functions in April as part of a three-pronged plan to deal with the growing number of small boats crossing the Channel. But it has now said it will leave the Home Office having to bolster up its operations by Border Force to resume the Channel command functions again. Well, our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White, explains.
Well, the Ministry of Defence have said that this was always their intention to review the command and control function that they've undertaken in the English Channel come the 31st of January next year. But it is, we believe, now the intention of the Ministry of Defence to hand back that command and control function to Border Force. Now, the Prime Minister in April at Lydd Airport in Kent announced what was a three-pronged plan to try to get to grips with the small boats crisis. And now all three of those elements are either halted or they're coming to an end. The command and control function, as I say, will come to an end at the beginning of next year. The other plan to send thousands of asylum seekers down to Rwanda for processing has been held back by a number of legal challenges in the court, and that's going nowhere fast. And then the third prong of this plan, the proposal to house at least 1,200 asylum seekers in a disused RAF base in the village of Linton-on-Ouse in Yorkshire, which would be the model, the blueprint for similar larger scale accommodation centres. Well, that has now been abandoned because of widespread public outrage in that particular area. So this plan, or the plans and proposals to try to get to grips with the small boats crisis appears at the moment to be somewhat in disarray as more asylum seekers continue to come across the English Channel every single day. You said in your introduction there, 20,300. Well, more came across yesterday. The weather, it's a bit hit or miss this week, but we are expecting in the days ahead more boats, small boats, to leave those shores in northwest France to try to get to UK waters.
Well, really concerning there. Thank you, Mark, for that explanation. Well, turning now to the war in Ukraine, as an extraordinary security blunder has reportedly allowed Ukraine to destroy a Wagner Group mercenaries base, with up to 100 fighters said to have been killed in the strike, after photos posted by the Russian state TV reporter appeared to give away the location of the militant group. Ukraine has used US-supplied HIMARS to conduct the military headquarters' notorious Russian private military group exercise. Well, joining me now is Ukraine Member of Parliament Andrei Osadchuk to go through exactly what's happened here, because on the face of it, it looks like Russia has made the most extraordinarily bad tactical error. A prominent journalist in Russia posting a photograph to social media that showed the location of one of these Wagner Group bases.
Good afternoon or good morning. I don't know what time is it in your place. So definitely it is another confirmation that Russian military and the Russian professionals, because Wagner group, it's probably one of the most professional part of Russian military. They're not so professional as one may think. So they pretty often do absolutely stupid mistakes. And these mistakes is giving us a chance to push them back. And like in the case of making public these photographs with their base, Ukrainian military was able to kill almost 100 of mercenaries from Wagner. Again, talking about these people, you shall understand that it is an integral part of Russian military. So Wagner cannot be compared with traditional military companies from the West. Wagner was always used by the Kremlin when they need to do something illegal, when they need to do some atrocities, when they want to promote their favorite approach, it's not we, and things like that. And for the last couple of months, the quantity of Wagner mercenaries increased dramatically. Before the war, I think it was between 1.5 2,000 people. Now they increase it up to 8,000 simply because they use hiring to Wagner as a hidden mobilization in Russia. Nevertheless, they put all their effort to fight with Ukraine. But we always are able to find successful ways how to reply to them. And the case with killing of more than 100 Wagner's people is a good evidence how Ukraine is efficient in using of Western weapons in the war.
Yes, and it really does seem that the power of Ukraine has grown in recent weeks and months with those specifically long-range weapons coming on stream. I wonder what the consequence of this operation will be. Obviously, you mentioned there 8,000 Wagner Group mercenaries operating potentially in Ukraine. Killing 100 of them doesn't sound like it will shift the needle that much, although there may be a significant propaganda moment here. What will be the consequences of this operation?
So first of all, everyone in the West shall understand one fundamental thing. During decades, everyone in the West was afraid of Russia. And this narrative that Russia is the second largest army in the world, so terrible, so big, and so on and so forth. Ukraine totally destroyed this myth. And what is very important, that Western weapons, which currently used by Ukrainian army, is generations ahead of all Soviet-type military equipment which used by Russian army. Meaning that modern Russia is incomparably weak comparing to any NATO army, and even not comparing to NATO in general. Secondly, I would not put much attention to Wagner standalone organization. We're fighting not with the Wagner military company. We are fighting with 150,000 of Russian soldiers on Ukrainian soil. These folks just the part of this barbarian crowd, which is temporary on the territory of Ukraine. So that's why we're not targeted them separately from any other Russian forces in Ukraine. Said that, I would like to emphasize once again that NATO weapons, Western weapons, is making turnaround in this war, because the accuracy and the power of this equipment and good preparation of Ukrainian army is doing a great job for Ukraine. The biggest problem for us for today is not enough shells, because we still not comparable with Russia due to their fire capacity. They still making this firewall strategy, when in fact they burn square kilometers of the lands. We reply on that with the accurate Western weapons, but we need more shells, because daily consumption is huge. But the overall picture for the moment looks to be a little bit better than it was months ago. It looks like now we're witnessing the turnaround in this war.
It's a really interesting map to look at where the Russian-occupied territory seems to be. Looking at the last few weeks, it's been fairly stagnant. Yes, some disputed areas of control, but just finally in this conversation, what is the latest information with regard to Kherson, that city that Russia took the western side of the Dnieper River that Ukraine has been advancing on? What is the latest there, and could the Russians be pushed back the other side of the river?
I think they may appear to be in the mousetrap. So they use our mistake in the beginning of the war when they were able to cross Dnieper and to occupy a significant part of the right bank of the Dnieper, as we say that. And now they understand that they need to keep this territory from political point of view, because for Kremlin, it's understood that defeating of the Russian military on the right bank of the Dnieper will be the end of Putin. Even if strategically it's better for them to go back, but they for sure will stay there. Yes, we destroy almost all bridges for the left bank of the Dnieper, and I'm pretty sure that this mousetrap will be closed very soon, and it will be beginning of the final end of Putin in Ukraine. At least we do all possible for that, and our allies and the United Kingdom is standing with us in this fight.
Absolutely, we are. Slava Ukraini. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Andrei Osadchuk, Ukrainian Member of Parliament. Thank you for your time. Well, finally today, we're now well into this Conservative leadership election, of course, and polling of party members suggests that Liz Truss is now the clear favourite to be our next Prime Minister. But it wasn't always the case. For a long time, Rishi Sunak's star seemed to shine the brightest within the party. He was, it appeared, the Prime Minister in waiting, but not so much anymore. It's now expected that Foreign Secretary Liz Truss will move across the streets to number 10, and that view appears to be confirmed by focus groups. Let's talk now to Luke Trill from the More in Common organisation, which has been running focus groups of Tory party members up and down the country. Welcome to the programme, Luke. I suppose the first question is, what is motivating people's opinions of these two candidates? I've seen you post in recent days about a real shift in opinion in recent months.
Yeah, absolutely, and perhaps as dramatic a shift as I've seen tracking public opinion. If you go back to the focus groups that we were running at the start of this year, it was absolutely clear that if Boris were to fall under the proverbial bus, that most of the public and Conservative voters wanted Rishi Sunak to take over. They thought he'd performed well during furlough. People would say things in focus groups like he's more prime ministerial than the Prime Minister. Whereas very few people at that time were actually aware of Liz Truss. We forget sometimes that Westminster politicians we know very well don't always cut through with the public. That changed very dramatically for two reasons. Firstly, Liz's stature and profile really rose once Russia invaded Ukraine, and she was seen by the public and Tory voters to have had a strong response there. And then you've got the really dramatic turning point in April when news about some of Rishi's family's tax affairs came out, but also the fact that he was seen perhaps not quite to have got the moment on cost of living as well. And those two things sort of played into one another, this sense of, gosh, can this guy really get it? And I think that actually was the turning point in this race. And what it meant was that when Boris resigned, the two candidates, based on what we heard in focus groups, had quite different challenges. Rishi actually at that point then had to start changing some of the negative impressions that had formed of him. Whereas Liz Truss actually, she had to build more of a positive first impression with people. And what we've seen in those groups as the race has gone on is that actually Liz Truss has done that job better at building that positive first impression than Rishi Sunak has managed in terms of turning around those negative impressions that people had. And, it may be fair, it might not be fair, but what's really interesting is that some of those, I guess what you might call image gaffes of Rishi have really cut through with the public. Things like, the shoes, the contactless. And people say it's not because they're anti-aspiration. They don't mind people having money. They just say, does he really get it? Whereas Liz, and you really saw it in those debates, portraying herself as that plain-speaking Yorkshire woman, that's actually gone down really well.
That's a really interesting point, because we have a clip from one of your focus groups conducted in Stoke that discusses that very issue of how they performed in those debates. Let's have a listen.
I actually think she's a team player. Like I say, she has stood by Boris, hasn't she? And she wasn't really... He did interrupt. The bits that I saw, I did think he was quite rude, to be honest. He didn't really give her much of a chance.
She seemed to listen more yesterday. She did less interrupting, less talking over. And I think in that respect came across better for me.
Rishi talked over Liz a lot. I don't know, maybe I was reading too much into the psychology behind that, but I just thought he didn't come across very well, whereas Liz came across better.
That to me is so interesting, because so much of the commentary around these debates has been how slick Rishi Sunak is and how he's better at presentation, but Liz is better at policy, and policy is winning out over presentation. But to some extent, your focus group suggests that actually it's Liz who's winning on presentation.
Absolutely. Campaigns are about a moment. And what's really interesting is in this moment, people aren't looking for the slickest contender. In fact, when we polled the attributes that people were looking for in a potential leader, slick got just 1%. Far higher was straight talking, honest and competent. And I think Liz has presented herself as the candidate with those attributes and those values. And again, really interesting when we did that Stoke focus group, lots of commenters said, Rishi did really well. He was dynamic, he was energetic, but people really didn't like the fact that he interrupted her so much. And they actually went on to say a bit later, it wasn't because, it's not just about being rude. It's about the fact that actually if you do that, will you then listen? And when you're in a cost of living crisis, of course, as we are at the moment, what people really want is someone that they think will listen and then respond appropriately.
It's fascinating how quickly these impressions of Rishi Sunak have turned around and then become embedded. I wonder, looking forward now, assuming, as I think seems overwhelmingly likely, that Liz Truss becomes Prime Minister, she's going to have a very short moment to then speak to the country and try and cement an opinion of herself with the country. What should she be doing in her first week or two in office?
I think the most important thing that she can do is to continue to project that sense that she gets it. She understands that this is a difficult time for lots of people, and the government will do what it can to help. We've also found, that lots of her policies are very popular. People do want to see that NI rise reversed. People do want to see lower taxes. I think if that's combined with support for the most vulnerable, she will be able to cement that image that she is the person that stands up for ordinary Britons. And I think that's going to be the real test as you get towards 2024.
Well, it will be fascinating to see if that does all unfold. For now, Luke Trill of More in Common, thank you very much for joining us on the briefing this afternoon. That's the end of the interview and indeed the programme. Thanks for sticking with us. Up next, it's Colin Brazier, but for now, here's the weather.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here with the latest weather update from the Met Office. Certainly some lively weather out there this afternoon, and there will be further showers and hit and miss thunderstorms during the rest of the day. Not everyone will be affected, though. It is turning drier towards the northwest. This area of high pressure is building in from the northwest, and that's settling things down across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. But these fronts and an area of low pressure to the south is maintaining some very intense downpours, some thunderstorms, and that will continue to be the case across southern and central England, parts of Wales overnight. The speckled nature of the showers indicates that not everyone will catch one, but if you do, well, prepare for some surface water issues, some tricky travelling conditions. For example, a warm night in the south, 15 to 16 Celsius. Much fresher for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 8 to 10 Celsius here. But actually, skies clearing overnight and a beautiful start to the day. Plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Increasingly North Wales, parts of the North Midlands as well. But the action is focused towards the south on Wednesday as far as showers and thunderstorms are concerned, and there could be some very lively downpours there towards the southeast, in particular some slow-moving thunderstorms. All the while it's turning cooler, temperatures at around 24, 25 Celsius in the southeast, high teens, low 20s elsewhere. And further showers will continue across central and southern parts of England through the evening and overnight. Eventually many of these will fade away. A gap then, clear spells for many, but further cloud and rain pushes into western Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. 12 or 13 Celsius in the north, 16, 17 further south, so still a relatively warm night to come. But actually for many it's a bright start to the day, certainly some sunshine to be had across northern England, the Midlands, Wales, southwest first thing. The cloud and rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland pushes south. And it turns more showery so that it's sunshine and showers for many on Friday, drier again on Saturday.